Hey, it is Zennial Gamer here today to talk about RTA. Specifically, I'm going to be proposing some of the changes that I would like to see that I think would improve RTA as a whole. So you guys can see I've got up on screen right now the different topics we're going to be talking about. These are all going to be in chapters in the video description below as well. We're going to talk a little bit about skills, accuracy and resistance balancing, pre-bans, leagues, a bunch of different ideas that I've had over time that I just tried to put together all in one place. Guys, first and foremost, if you agree or disagree with any of this stuff, please feel free to drop it in the comments below. But in particular, share this video around. And obviously that helps me as a creator. I'd love to see more views. But it's not just about that. It's about trying to get attention to some different ideas. And maybe if we can get enough views on the video, Com2Us will take notice and consider an idea or two. So with that said, there's one more thing I wanted to say before I jumped into the video. Last season after the SWC, which was like an RNG fest, there was a lot of talk about whether or not RTA and Summoners War in general is an esport. I want to throw this out here now. I do believe it is an esport, and it's pretty straightforward. All sports and all esports have RNG in them. So for you basketball fans, the example I always give is Kawhi Leonard in the conference finals 2 years ago. Bounces the ball off the rim 4 times. It's a once-in-a-career shot with 0 seconds left to send Toronto to the championship match. When they get to the championship match, they face a Golden State team that has like no living players left. And Kawhi Leonard wins the championship, but did he really? Yet the next year, especially because LeBron had been injured, everybody says that Kawhi Leonard is the best player in the world. It was pure RNG. Maybe not pure. I mean, he's obviously an incredibly skilled player. He is one of the 10 best players in the world, but that anointment as best player in the world was due to RNG. So, all video games, all activities, all games we can play with the possible exception of maybe chess and like a couple of ancient Chinese games have some RNG. With that said, RTA would be so much better if there was less RNG. I personally, my opinion is that the game is 7 years old now, and Com2Us has constantly added stuff as they have to do to keep the game alive. But as the game gets bigger and there's more monsters and there's more interactions, it shifts the meta in certain ways that kind of forces us into more of an RNG-based play style. We've basically been forced to do more stuff that's RNG, so a lot of my ideas today are going to be about trying to turn back the clock so that we're using less RNG. You can't eliminate it entirely, and I'll talk about that more later. It can't be eliminated entirely, or it would not be really a competition. It would just be whoever's got the best runes automatically wins. But I would like to see a greater balance where there's less RNG. So with that said, let's jump into the video, and first and foremost, we're going to talk about skill balancing. So, a lot of people were happy, a lot of people were unhappy about the Cheong nerf. Me personally, I've got Cheong. I thought he was a great monster. I think he's probably still a usable monster, a little bit limited. Whatever your thoughts on the nerf, I thought the actual idea of the nerf was perfect to balance a lot of the current RTA reset meta. To balance Oki, I feel he should get the Cheong treatment. I think that if Oki's skill 2 would reset first and then strip, he would be an incredibly more balanced unit. You could still use him in a lot of the current types of control cleaves that we see, but it would be possible to try and counter him, or it would be easier to try and counter him. I would also like to see Hathor get the Cheong treatment, because if we nerf Oki, then all we're going to do is return to the Hathor meta, right? There are some other monsters as well that have had strip into blah 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 added to them. So off the top of my head, Wind Bison and Cichlid the Wind Mermaid. Wind Bison is a little bit more balanced because of his low speed, but I think if you nerfed Hathor and Oki, we would start to see Wind Bison cleaves, and if that were the case, then I would want to see him get the Cheong treatment as well. I think this is the biggest reason that we've moved, just my opinion here, the biggest reason that we've been forced to move into this more RNG-based meta, which is really what it is, and to clarify a little bit, the control meta often comes down to whoever's fastest. But preventing yourself from being controlled is RNG based, and successfully controlling people is RNG based. So a lot of what we're doing right now is kind of like determined by RNG. So to get away from that, we need to get away from the monsters that strip into X. That's really what drove us towards this current meta. That was the problem with Cheong. He stripped into defense break, and then on a violent proc, he stripped into defense break, attack bar reduction, reset. That's what Oki does. He strips into reset, and so on and so on. So I would like to see the Cheong treatment applied to a lot of monsters. It doesn't have to just be limited to strip into X also. As other monsters rise up in the meta, this is a great way to balance a lot of their skills without actually destroying the monster. Making them do their actions in a different sequence could a lot of times destroy them without really changing their kit. Now, the second idea I have for skill balancing, I'm going to throw this out there. I think this is an incredibly complicated idea to bring into the game. I think it's probably too big of a change. I don't even know that I want to see it, but I feel like it's worth discussing because it is an interesting idea, and that is initial turn cooldowns. So right now, when we go into a match, every single monster has every single skill available. Skills 1, 2, 3, and sometimes 4. In some other gacha games I've seen, like the one I play, you guys have seen, hopefully you guys have seen some of my sponsored videos, Dragon Champions, which I do still play every day, do still really enjoy quite a bit, and I am partnered with them. They have this feature called initial cooldowns, which is basically like the strongest skills can't be used on turn 1. You have to get through to turn 2 or turn 3 before you can use them. So as we see Lucian amping up on the top of the screen, and no, I'm not proposing a nerf to Lucian, but just as an example, imagine if Lucian had to wait 1 turn before he could use his amp. So he came into the match with skills 1 and 2 available, but not skill 3. Again, I'm not proposing this for Lucian, just an example, but how would that change things? You would all of a sudden have to start putting HP and defense on Lucian, or you would have to theorycraft comps that would keep him alive. For the nukers, for the cleaves, for stuff like that, that's probably not a change that we want to see. But for some of the monsters, particularly control monsters, this would be another way to try and force people to use a more balanced comp instead of just going 3 strippers, 2 speed leads, defense break, and AoE nuke and control. It would force them to theorycraft something that would keep their control monster alive and maybe just create a little bit more balance overall. Okay, next up, let's talk about accuracy and resistance. Now, this is something I've been talking about on streams for a while. It's gotten very mixed reactions. For me personally, this is the single biggest change. If I could pick only one change in the game, I would rather see this even than instant power-ups. Like, this is what I want to see most. Now, I know the audience is going to be split 50-50 on it, so leave some comments on your thoughts in the section below. But what I would like to see is maximum resistance increased to, personally, I'd like to see it increased to 185%, but I think 150, 175, 180, 200, all of those numbers are numbers we could consider. We would change the starting resistance on all monsters to 0. We would change the minimum resistance. You know that guaranteed innate 15%, like every monster can resist on RNG? That's kind of BS. That's an unnecessary RNG. If you want to resist something, put a resistance stat on your monster. Let's force us to use some theorycraft on runes, and let's also add some value to resistance. So, starting resistance to 0, minimum resistance to 0, and remove the resistance lead and remove awakening into resistance. Just change those to something else, right? Now, when we talk about, let's say, doing 185 resistance monster, once you've eliminated all that other stuff, think about how many stats that requires. That's a 64 resistance rune on a slot 6, and it's still another 121 resistance you have to find on your other 5 runes. That's another 24 to 25 resistance per rune. It's an incredibly difficult build to make, and if you do make that build, you're going to have almost no other stats. You're going to have no speed, no HP, none of that stuff. So it becomes a viable build that we could use for a monster like Jemire, for example, but you're sacrificing to make that build, so it becomes part of the checks and balances counter. It becomes part of that interaction of you pick a control, I pick a max resistance cleanser to counteract that, then the enemy's job is to identify which monster is built in max res and eliminate that monster through the bans. Now, the other side of this is that it also means that accuracy becomes more important. We get rid of that de facto 85% accuracy cap, and it becomes a real 100% accuracy cap. This would also force people who are running control comps to put more accuracy on their monsters. So for example, you can't run Oki at, let's say, 55 accuracy and 25 accuracy from an artifact. That's 80 accuracy, which is damn near max accuracy right now. You run him 60 accuracy, 25 from an artifact. You can get 60 accuracy pretty much from innates, especially for monsters who awaken into resistance. You can get 60 accuracy. I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy. It obviously requires high rune quality, but you're not detracting from the main stats like the speed and the attack and the crit damage to get enough accuracy to play effectively in a control type meta. But if you know that you're going to be facing monsters where resistance all of a sudden matters, then it's going to force you to try and get up to that 100 accuracy, which makes it harder to get to that cleave level speed, and it makes it harder to get all that OP damage. So it would balance. Again, I'm banging on Oki because obviously Oki was the meta, the worst meta ever last season. I know they nerfed him. I know he may not be quite as meta this season, but the meta before Oki was the same thing. It was Control. It was Hathor. The meta going forward is most likely going to involve something that either uses artifact damage or some form of control. I mean, this game has always been about control and attack bar reduction, and that's great. That's part of the theory craft, but it's also always had checks and balances. It's had counters. There should always be something that can counter what the enemy can do. And right now, there's not a lot that counters the control meta other than just being faster and cleaving, or getting lucky with your resistance checks. So this change right here, it would force changes to how we rune our monsters on both sides, which adds a lot more strategy into the monster builds. And then it would create a lot more checks and balances as we did our draft. Okay, next up, let's talk about pre-bans. This is actually probably my favorite idea from this video. Accuracy resistance change is what I want to see most, but this is, I think, my favorite, just like fun, cool idea that I have. So I would like to see two types of pre-bans, user pre-bans and auto pre-bans. So we're going to start off by talking about user pre-bans. User pre-bans will be pre-configured before you go into the match. This would not affect SWC. They would do their normal bans the way they do. But in season, we don't have bans now anyway, so this doesn't change anything. Like, one of the concerns when I've mentioned this idea on stream, people are like, well, you don't know who you're matching yet. That's the point. You're going to be doing a configured pre-ban based on the monsters that you don't like to match up with, not based on what your opponent's monsters are. This isn't about giving you an advantage over your opponent, it's about forcing us to be more creative with our monster building. So if I go into a match knowing that I'm going to face random 3 pre-bans, I got to have a bigger box built, and I've got to have more monsters that work together and synergize. And it forces me not to just run the 7 same monsters in RTA. Because at the end of the day, like, I've got a crazy box. You guys have seen my stream. I have 384 stars. That's ridiculous. But the normal player, the normal endgame player who's been playing for a while, you've got 100 or 200. I said 4 stars. I meant 6 stars, obviously. But the normal endgame player who's been playing for a while, you guys have got 100, 200, 6 stars, right? How many of them do you ever use? Like, we use 30 for Siege. A mix of most of those same 30 are going to go in our guild content and our arena box. Now we only need 2 teams for dungeons with 9 or 10 monsters. So we have all these monsters just collecting dust, and a lot of them are cool, and a lot of them are fun, but we can't use them because the meta forces us away from them. So taking in some random, it's not random because it's user chosen, but some unknown pre-bans would force us to build out bigger boxes, look at monsters that are less utilized, get more creative, do more theory crafting, and generally I think just make it more fun. Now, with that said, obviously early game players don't have 100, 200 plus 6-star monsters. So what I propose is that challengers would have 1 configured user pre-ban. When I say configured, what I mean is there's like a settings option. Before you go into RTA, you pre-ban the monster. When the match starts, both players are just notified of the pre-ban instantly. There's no delay in the drafting, and those monsters are just banned out. Fighter level would get 2 configured pre-bans. Conquerors would get 3. And Guardians would get 5. Now, the Guardian number might be big. Maybe Guardians should still be 4. Maybe even Guardians should be 3. We could, that's something that could be up for debate, because now you're talking about potentially 10 different monsters. If you're a Guardian level player, you should have a big, well-runed monster box, and you should be able to work around those pre-bans. You should be able to counter what your opponent's doing, and maybe we see some really random fun stuff in RTA. Now, with that said, we all know LD5s are OP, but LD5s are also, like, valuable. They're great for people to get. So I think you should have one LD5 max in the pre-ban, and I think there are some that probably shouldn't be pre-bannable because it's just not fair. Like Gianna, as much as we all hate facing Gianna, she's going to be automatically everybody's LD5 pre-ban. That's not fair to the Gianna owners. So I think maybe like the top 10 or 20 LD5s should not be eligible for pre-ban, and then you should only be able to pre-ban one LD5, but you don't have to do the LD5. So if you're a Guardian and you have 5 pre-bans, you can do 5 elemental monsters, or you can do 4 elementals and 1 LD5, but you can't pick any of the triple S tier LD5s, just to kind of make it fair to the people who have those. Now, the auto pre-ban is the other side of this, and this is kind of what really excites me. Every season, at the end of the season, the 3 monsters that were used the most that season will automatically be pre-banned from the following season. So if Oki is the broken meta in Season 16, then Oki cannot be used at all in Season 17. It forces a meta change. We don't have to do it through tweaks and skills and balances. We can force the meta change, because if you can't use last season's meta, you're going to have to get creative. You're going to have to build a new box every season. You're going to have to approach each season like it's an esport, like it's actually a new strategy. I love this idea. I hope you guys do too. It's my favorite idea. Now, the other side of it would be the 3 highest win percentage. They would have to have a minimum of 200 fights, so it can't be like one person randomly use CN, the Blution, and won, so now Blution is pre-banned, or whatever. But the top 3 monsters with the highest win percentage that were used in at least 200 fights, or maybe 500 fights, or something that it's high enough that it couldn't be abused, those would also be automatically pre-banned. So going into the next season, we'd have potentially 6 monsters we couldn't use, or there may be some overlap on the auto pre-bans, like Oki may be highest win rate and also highest usage, so be 3 to 6 auto pre-bans, and then we'd have the user configured pre-bans. You could be looking at as many as 16 monsters banned in Guardian matches, which would just force us to get creative, and for me, personally, it would be a lot more fun. Okay, next up we've got leagues and matchmaking. So we're going to start off by talking, and I know this is actually a topic that's really sensitive for a lot of people. A lot of people complain about this. These are actually 2 ideas that I've had for a long time. I think I've talked about them in our Discord server, so this is a great plug, by the way. There's a link in the video description if you guys want to join the community. We'd love to have you. Jump into the Discord server, but I think I've talked about this in Discord. I don't know if I've talked about this in stream, but this is my idea. This is the structure of my idea of what I'd like to see. I would like to see RTA leagues, which would be broken down into 5 leagues. So right now, if you look at it, they're not leagues, but right now, if you look at the ranks, we have Challenger, Fighter, Conqueror, and Guardian. And the single biggest category of all of them is Fighter 3. And that is, it's kind of brutal and it's kind of toxic at the same time. It's really hard for somebody to move out of Fighter 3. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but it feels like 50 to 70% of the game is in Fighter 3, or at least they're in Fighter. It's too condensed, and the reason for that is obviously because CompTOS wants you to get out of Challenger quickly, but Conqueror is like the elite level. A lot of us don't even realize, when you think about it, Conqueror players are the top 10% of the game. That's pretty legit. If you've made Conqueror, that's pretty legit. It's also what makes it so hard to get into Conqueror. So when we think about the toxicity that you see in Fighter 3, people are like, oh man, I just saw a match with 5 LD5s, or I just, whatever, I got cleaved by an Oki meta team. It's because that person maybe is like the 10.01%, which is still super, super legit. It's just the problem is that those fighter ranks are too big, so people can't move out. So I would like to see 5 leagues created, which would be Challenger, Fighter, Conqueror, Guardian, and Legend. So instead of Legend being the rank 1 player, it would be a league of the top 500 or so players. Then we would have Champion. Champion would be the new rank 1 player. So we would have Legend League for the top 500 players, and then the winner would be the Champion. Or you could call it a Champion League and leave Legend where it is. Either way. Doesn't matter, it's semantics, but the point is, let's stretch it out to 5 leagues. Let's make Conqueror a little bit bigger. So now we've got 5 leagues. Let's capture 20% of the players in Challenger, 20 in Fighter, 20 in Conqueror, 20 in Guardian. Maybe it needs to stretch a little bit lower. I mean, if we sat down and worked it out, right? We need to know exactly the analytics that Com2uS has of how many people are playing, but maybe the Legend League should be the top 500 players, the Guardian League should be the next 4,500 players down, and then Conqueror should run down out to the, Conqueror C3 would be players who are in the top 10% of the game outside of Guardian. C2 would be the top 20%, C1 would be the top 30. Fighter 3 would then be top 40, Fighter 2, top 50, and on down the list. So basically we would be creating a little bit more equality within the leagues. Now, you would have to use 150 wings to change leagues. So this would also, it wouldn't completely fix the issue of botting, but it would definitely fix the issue of Guardian players farming. So you would be allowed to change leagues in season, but only to advance forward. You could move forward from one league to another in season if you're dominating. We would need to set some sort of criteria that would be based off of score or win percentage. One of my thoughts here, which we're going to talk about on the next idea, actually, is the duration of the leagues. One of my thoughts is that the Challenger and Fighter leagues would run for a shorter time than the Conqueror, Guardian, and Legend leagues. And you would see the top percentage of players advance out of Challenger and Fighter when the mid-season, like if you're mid-season Guardian, when the Challenger ends, or if you're mid-season Conqueror when the Challenger League and Fighter Leagues end, then we might see some Challengers and Fighters promote, and maybe the bottom level of the Conquerors drop out in that mid-season exchange. You would be able to continue increasing through leagues, and this is necessary for people who have never played RTA before, right? So you would be able to continue increasing through leagues if you meet certain benchmarks, certain points of domination. So, without having a whole point structure in place, which would get too complicated for this video, I tried to avoid using too many numbers in this video, and now I'm realizing that it would have been easier if I had them. But just for argument's sake, let's say Conqueror is 1,500 points, and you have a Fighter player who reaches 1,600 points, they would automatically promote to Conqueror League. That's what we would need to do to get the strongest players out of Fighter and move them up where they need to be, and also to make sure it's not unfair to the people who are doing RTA for the first time. So again, you would be able to advance unlimited leagues in one season, but you would only ever be able to drop one league within your season, and you must do 150 wings to advance or decrease. Now, the reason for that is it makes sure that somebody who quits the game for 2 years can't just come back being a Guardian player and Challenger, and it makes sure that we can't just have Guardian players tanking to farm in Challenger. So it's not a perfect system. I know there's some possibilities for abuse, but it would be a lot better, I think, than what we have right now. Each league would have its own prizes. Each league would have its own trophies. Each league would, and obviously the prizes would scale down a little bit, but it's the same thing as right now. We have skins and we have auras, so maybe we have like the Challenger League would just have one aura for the finalists, and then the Fighter League would have that aura plus another. And then the Conqueror would have that plus another. Guardian would get the skin. Legend would maybe get some sort of battle, like an arena. Oh, that's cool. I didn't even have this idea before the video, but we have the Siege battlefield, right? So like Legend League players would get an RTA battlefield. That would be badass. Anyway, you guys get the idea. Now let's talk about matchmaking. So one of the issues that people have is like, I'm a Conqueror 2 player that matched up with a Guardian 2, or I'm a Fighter 2 that matched up with a Conqueror 2. Part of the reason this happens is simply because we all have a finite number of wings, we don't all use them every day, and Com2uS needs to be able to match us within a reasonable time. So, what I would like to see is that matchmaking will be primarily within your league. If you're in the Fighter League, you match any other Fighter player, 1 through 3. There should be a little bit of competition if you've moved up to Fighter, and we're now condensed. Remember, it's only the 20% range of the game, so a Fighter 3 might be stronger than a Fighter 1, but you should have a chance, at least, and it helps you to move up in the ranks. If you are in queue for 15 seconds or longer, then it would expand to match you to either the top rank of the league below you or the bottom rank of the league above you. So in theory, if a Fighter 1 could not find any other fighter to match after 15 seconds in queue, it would expand out to Challenger 3 and to Conqueror 1, and it would never go further than that. So that would close the gap of matchmaking. It would try and keep us centered within a 20% range, but it would also address the issue of us not having to wait in queue for too long. Now, the other thing that a lot of us have trouble with is the fact that sometimes you can face the same person 2, 3, 4 times in a row. Some of us like that, some of us hate it. I don't know if there's a universal opinion on that, so I would simply say toggle the option for rematches. Like, rather, create a configurable toggle, like a setting in RTA that you just say, I want a rematch, or I don't ever want a rematch. And if you say, I don't want a rematch, then it will never match you with the same person twice. And if it says, I want a rematch, and the other person also says, I want a rematch, then it will give you preference to rematch the same person twice. Because me personally, I love to face the same person 3 times in a row. I think it creates more strategy in the picks and bans, but I know a lot of people don't like it. So give us the option, and we'll get some rematches, and the people who don't want a rematch won't. Okay, next up, we've got turn meter. Now we're moving into some of the ideas that I think might be a little more controversial, because I'm going to be talking about more ways to reduce RNG. When I talk about turn meter, what I'm proposing is something actually new. So we have an attack bar right now, and obviously the attack bar fills up when a monster hits 100%, whichever monster has the highest attack bar, because you can go over 100, will take a turn. Then there are monsters that are intended to either take a turn instantly or have their attack bar filled up. So demons, Garudas, Horuses, for example. So the Belial, the water demon, and Beelzebub, the dark demon, they resurrect and they get 100% attack bar, plus minus whatever's on artifacts. Well, no minus, just plus, but you know. But they don't get guaranteed a turn, they just get that attack bar. Horuses will actually give a monster like an extra 100% attack bar, same thing for Garudas. And then we have Antares. We've all fought an Antares that took every single freaking turn. We've all fought an Antares that just sat there and was decoration. Or at least we've used an Antares that sat there and was decoration, right? So I would like to see a lot of this variance RNG type stuff. Like the demons can get cut by violent procs, which is just kind of BS. The demons can get beaten by higher attack bar. There is a little bit more skill in that. I will give that. I've seen a lot of people who will work around a demon and try and set things up. So that is somewhat more skill based, but it's still a little too kind of RNG for me. And then you have the monsters like Antares, which are just stupid and have, in my opinion, are stupid and have no place in RTA. So what I would like to see is to eliminate the stolen turns with a turn meter. So a monster like Antares, instead of having a 15% random chance of taking a turn, his turn meter would increase by 15% every time somebody took a turn. Now this is not an attack bar, so it's not like the Omdawat passive. Instead, it's a turn meter. When the Antares turn meter hits 100%, he takes a turn. No matter what else anybody's attack bar is, no matter what violent status they're in, it's a turn meter that progresses. And maybe we give him like 20 or 25% on his turn meter instead of the 15 random that it is now, because it's actually 15% that increases. Every time he doesn't take a turn, it goes up. So maybe you give him 25% turn meter. That means every 4 turns, Antares is taking a turn. Makes him about just as strong as he is right now. He's going to take the same number of turns on scale, but it makes him more predictable, which makes it less RNG based. And that gives us the opportunity to use more skill as we're countering him and which monsters we draw in and so forth. Now, monsters that fill up attack bar, I feel like that should also be an instant turn, as that, at least to me, feels like what the intent of the skill should have been. Those skills are mostly really old skills that came from a long, older meta, like the Horuses, the Garudas. They're very old monsters. And I don't think we had the same levels of speed and rune quality and artifacts and all the stuff we have in the game now that interacted with that. So I would like to see the attack bar be an instant turn. And then resurrecting monsters. And obviously, guys, disclaimer, I have Beelzebub. This certainly benefits me, but I do feel that a monster that is supposed to resurrect and take a turn should get to take a turn and should not just be able to die again by a violent proc. It means, for example, Beelzebub, 22% of the time my Beelzebub resurrects, he just dies to a violent proc. So he can already be reset, he can already be just ignored, but then to have him lose to a violent proc after you set everything up perfectly is one of the more frustrating things. In RTA, I suspect that Belial owners or Belial players would agree with me as well. I also think Belial would become more in the meta if his turn was guaranteed. Okay, next up, this is an idea that I've posted on Reddit. I've done a video on this, so I'm not actually going to spend a long time on it. I already know it's a 50-50 divide. Half the people love it, half the people hate it. But I do have to, every time I talk about RTA, I have to throw it out because I really believe in it. So I feel like violent procs should not activate passives if the monster took a turn the first time. So what I mean by this is if Vertihile takes a turn and boosts the team by 40%, the attack bar by 40%, and then procs and Boosts the team by another 40%. It's one of the most broken procs in the game. The thing is, most monsters, when they proc, it turn cycles them closer to their cooldowns, and it can be devastating. A timely proc can be devastating, but it's not guaranteed to be. If your Ganymede procs while the enemy has immunity, or your Ciara procs while the enemy has immunity, it's a dead proc. But Vertihile's procs are never dead. Lauren's procs are almost never dead. Diana's procs are never dead. These are issues. The first two are issues of cooldown, of passives, and the third one is an issue of a cooldown. So it makes it so that Violent is more powerful on some monsters than on others. So the fix to this, in my mind, is that passive should not activate on a Violent proc when the monster took a turn. So if you proc out of control, your passive works. But if you take a turn and proc, your passive does not work. And then Violent procs don't reduce cooldowns. This means Diana can't do infinite turn cycling from human to pony form. This means that Hathor can't strip into AoE sleep. So this would create a little bit more balance on those control monsters in Violent. It means that Oki can't reset into AoE stun. Things like, actually, Oki's cooldown would be up, so Oki still would be able to strip into AoE stun, at least at the start of the fight, but maybe not necessarily later. Now, the other thing I would really like to see is that in-skill Violent procs would receive the same treatment as Violent runes, so you don't have an Orion that goes 7 times in a row. I had a Yen go 11 times in a row on me in Special League. I mean, that was stupid. It was just ridiculous. What can you do against a monster that goes 11 times in a row? So, if you have an innate ability to proc, Orion is skill 1, Yen is passive, Draco is skill 1, etc., it should have the same treatment as Violent procs. Okay, next up, let's talk about league duration and also special leagues. So what I suggest is that if we were to use the multiple leagues structure like I suggested, challenger leagues would be 2 weeks long only. The prizes are going to be really small, so it shouldn't be a big deal. And the new thing that Com2uS added where we get lots of medals for achievements, that should only reset when the Guardian and Legend leagues reset so that it stays balanced. But the reason for making challenger leagues 2 weeks only, a couple of reasons, actually. One is Challenger is kind of like your introduction into RTA, and I feel like a lot of Challenger players would benefit from having the league kind of recycling a little bit, getting that reset. More importantly, because Challenger League is really intended in this structure to be the stepping stone into Fighter, so if you have it resetting every 2 weeks, we can be promoting more people into Fighter. Fighter and Conqueror leagues would be 4 weeks for pretty much the exact same reason. Guardian and Legend would be 8 weeks. I know I have it as 2 months on screen, but just for the symmetry, it would actually need to be 8 weeks. When the Guardian and Legend, or when any of these leagues started, actually, we would then know the actual end date, because Com2uS doesn't always announce it, so we don't always know when it's going to end. But if we had a set duration, we would always know exactly when it's going to end. We would actually have 6 RTA seasons per year, which would be pretty cool. I would like to see the RTA seasons be a little bit shorter, in part because right now, RTA seasons are really long, and a lot of Guardian level players just rush in the last 2 weeks, which kind of makes it unfair for a lot of people who are in lower ranks who are trying to hold their ranks. Now, the leagues would partially fix this, but even then, if we had Legend players who were trying to rush up through Guardian ranks, they'd be steamrolling the Guardians because they went 2.5 months without playing, and then at the very end of the season, they're trying to get all their points. So a shorter season will discourage at least a little bit those players who are rushing up at the end, and then it gives us more rewards, and it gives us more reason to get engaged and re-engaged into RTA on a regular basis. We actually talked about the in-season promotion demotion on the earlier slide, so I won't go back into that again. But the other thing I would really like to see is special leagues being run concurrently. Now, if we had to lower the rewards a little bit, I'd actually be okay with that. Or if we just increase the cost of the transmogs, whatever, I'd be okay with that. I just want special leagues to run because it's something different and it's a lot of fun. And I don't see why we can't have them both and why we can only have 3 2-week special leagues a year when Special League gives us so much additional variety. I actually have another video that'll be coming out later where I propose a whole bunch of different types of Special Leagues also. So that would work in conjunction with this, where we would have a 1 month long Special League, or yeah, probably a 1 month long Special League. So we'd have 12 Special Leagues a year, and we'd probably have like 12 different types of Special Leagues, or maybe 6 types that run twice, depending on which ones make the most sense. But it would be a continuous rotation, and we would have the extra 30 wings a day that we could do. So you could do Special League, you could do RTA, or you could do both. But there's, to me, there's no reason why they shouldn't both be running. I don't know if it's a server issue, but it feels like it's something they should be able to code. Okay, and then we are going to wrap up with, I'm calling it fun stuff, but it's really more like quality of life. I guess quality of life would have been a better name for this slide. But so we're going to wrap up with the QOL stuff. First suggestion here is I would like to see a practice queue. So right now we do have goodwill rooms, and every time I try and go into a goodwill room, I can't find a battle because I don't know who's in there AFK. I don't know who's in there who's already queued up for another match, things like that. I would like to just see an unranked queue by league, of course. So there would actually be an option. So you could queue up in your own league, or you could queue up through all leagues. It would just be a configuration option when you picked it. And obviously, somebody who has said they only want to queue up in their own league could not queue up against somebody in a different league who says they want to queue up outside of their league. So it would be smaller queues. I expect we would spend a little bit more time in matchmaking, but it would certainly be a lot more efficient than the goodwill rooms we have now. We should keep the goodwill rooms because one-on-one duels are really cool, but this would give us a way to give us a way to do more wings and test out our comps against people, whether we want to try people that are stronger by going outside our league or we want to try people in our league. It's just a way to test comps without having to take it live and without having to really hunt for people in goodwill. I would like to see the ability to flag specific monsters for replays. So this is something I hear on stream a lot. People are like, I just got this crazy good LD5. What comp can I use? The problem is, I might be a streamer, but I'm not a huge LD5 owner. I did get really lucky. I got 2 LD5s in February, Pontos and Van Cliff. Before that, I had Beelzebub. Those are the 3 LD5s I have. So if you ask me almost any other LD5, I might know what it does. I might have some decent ideas, but I can't just tell you a comp off the top of my head. As much as I'd like to, I just don't know the monster. I don't have experience with it. And that's going to be true if they ask in their guild. I mean, these are rare monsters. So you get this new great LD5 and you don't know what to do with it. So if we could flag monsters for replays, like I just pulled Wedjet, I want to flag and see every RTA replay that has Wedjet in it. And then I can actually get some ideas and inspirations for comps. I'd like to see us be able to save builds. This would be particularly useful if we do the concurrent special leagues that I suggested earlier, because a lot of times you break all your builds for a special league, and then it takes forever to restore your builds. Sometimes you just want to move a rune around. Like we have RTA runes now, there is no cost for moving it, so there's really no reason that we can't just save a build and then just swap back to that build whenever we're ready. And then the last thing, I would really like to see favorites be extended to 40. And if we do concurrent special leagues, we need a separate special leagues favorite, probably a special leagues rune manager as well. But at least for me, I struggle. Well, it's not that I struggle. I run more than 30 monsters in RTA because I have so many different counter picks. And so I struggle to find those monsters in my monster box if they're outside my top 30. So a lot of times I have the right counter and it's ruined, and I simply run out of time because I can't find it in my box. I've tried leaving monsters outside of storage with everything else in, but it still gets messy, it still gets complicated, so it would just be really nice if they would extend our favorites out to 40 or even 50. Alright guys, this was a really long video, but it's a lot of stuff that I really feel would be so great to come into the game. It's a huge overhaul. If you did all of this at once, it would be massive. So I don't know that necessarily all of it needs to come in at once, particularly some of the balancing stuff. So, for example, if we were to give the Cheong treatment to to Hathor and Oki, do we necessarily need to make all the changes to Violent Procs? Maybe not. Maybe we just need to make it so that Violent Procs don't activate on passives so that things are balanced out a little bit more. Maybe we don't need to do the cooldown part. If we were to do the violent thing, maybe we don't need to do something else. So I don't know that every one of these changes needs to come in at once. If I had to prioritize, as I said earlier on, the 2 biggest changes I want to see, the accuracy resistance change is huge for me. And then the other one is I really love the idea of the auto and the user-based pre-bans, just because it forces us to get creative. It forces us to not use the same 7 monsters every time. Alright guys, so on that note, as always, I appreciate you watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave some comments in the section below. Tell me which ideas you liked, tell me which ideas you didn't. And if you like some of these ideas, please share this video around. Let's try and get some attention, try and get some notice. Maybe Come To Us will put in 1 or 2 of the ideas. Or maybe somebody on Reddit will pick it up and put up a post, and somebody with a bigger voice will suggest it and come to us. We'll put in 1 or 2 ideas. Whatever it takes, man. Just get me that resistance build and those pre-bans. On that note, guys, once again, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, if you're still with me to this point, then that means that you probably liked the video, found it entertaining, or even better, both. So please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment down below, because those things help the channel grow, and more importantly, they show me that the video is useful, and that's the whole reason I do this in the first place.